Yo, yo, yo. What's good? What's good? It's Stormy B Man, and I am back. Welcoming you to Stormy B Man Reacts. Zack Snyder says that the Dark Knight and Justice League projects can still happen. Part 2. This is an interview excerpt from when just about a month ago, Zack Snyder gave a sit-down interview with Josh Horowitz, a gentleman who is a content creator and has access to speak to the likes of this famous, renowned director. In part 1, we discussed how he got on track to start off with the DCEU franchise and how he had planned to make this universe something that could not only rival what Marvel was doing, but give an extended look at the mighty DC characters such as Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and The Flash. The universe was off to a pretty good start, and then tragedy had struck the Snyder family, and he got pulled away from his Justice League project before totally completing. In the aftermath, the project was completed, but it was less than what was initially thought to be a representation of how Zack wanted to tell the story of these characters coming together. And then even later still, he had an opportunity to present us with his own version of the film, Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was far different, far longer, and extended, a story told with these characters that began to get audiences riled up again for what might have been. And so now we find ourselves with the sale of Warner Brothers and DC. There are going to be changes going ahead, and there's a little bit of talk about the return of the DCEU with Zack Snyder's participation, of course. Even if it doesn't come to pass, the conversation that was held between Mr. Horowitz and Zack Snyder was quite interesting, because we got a chance to see that Zack, even though he's been away from the project for a number of years, he still exercises the same, let's just call it, enthusiasm for these characters and his project that he had brought to light. So, we're going to pick that interview up where we get a chance to see more of what Zack had to say. And I'm going to give my reaction to the video, because this, of course, is Stormy B Man Reacts, an offshoot of our Nerds on Culture show. Let's take a listen.
A solo Superman movie pretty early on when you and Chris.
We did. We absolutely did. And our plan was, my plan was always to hopefully, have this, once we sort of established this timeline, we could branch off and go do this Brainiac movie that would have like a Superman Brainiac, like, solo concept.
Now, that is so super interesting because in all of the years of Superman films being brought to live action, Brainiac, a major DC character and Superman adversary, is a character that many people had dreamed of what it would be like if Superman could face this character in live action. Even through the years when new renditions of the Superman character were being considered, Brainiac was always an underlying character that would be considered for a Superman story being told. And with the changes in technology, being able to conceptualize Brainiac in a modern time as well as with modern technology, it would be quite a wondrous thing to check out cinematically, especially if done right, especially with a director who has an exceptional talent with visuals, as does Zack Snyder. So it really is an interesting thought that he mentioned this. Let's hear further of what Zack has to say about this.
But the Justice League, and in the end, in my opinion is that in the end, the full Justice League saga is a Superman story, regardless of how much Batman plays into it. In the end, it's a Superman film. Like in the end, after when it's all said and done, Superman is the survivor. He is the savior. Without him, there's nothing. It is a Superman-centric universe. Though I would say Batman is the sacrifice that we need to make to have that world.
As strong a character as Batman is, he is a mortal man. And for Zack to stress that about Bruce Wayne, Batman, being someone who sacrifices, to me, that's already an interesting concept, because the Batman character has been thought of as a vigilante and someone who breaks the law and forming his own sense of justice. So amazing it would be to think of doing that. Now, he'll go on and talk about how his idea of using Batman would come to mind. Let's take a listen to this.
Yeah, and so that was always the way we thought about it. And so to answer your question, there was this idea that a Superman film couldn't exist without what we're doing, or would exist instead of. I never really thought about it in those terms. I always thought it was like that we were just making it like a 14-hour movie.
And you told me before that obviously Chris Nolan brings you in initially, and
Yep.
there was a very, very brief conversation of like, would it even make sense to continue with his Batman in this universe? But I guess the deal breaker, I guess if Bale had still been the Batman at the end of Dark Knight Rises, maybe you seriously consider it. But the other Batman, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that's not as clean a story for you.
I believe that's 100% correct. Is that, and though I love that concept, Joseph, I think, is an amazing actor, and it's a cool thing. But like, I don't think it was for me to flesh that out.
Right.
Where yeah, I think if Bale had stayed, if it had ended with Christian Bale standing on a building overlooking Gotham, with silhouetted by the lights of Gotham, then that's a serious conversation. There, he's not in Italy, retired, drinking wine and relaxing. If he is a current crime fighter, then I think those universes could have mixed.
Now, just imagine if Christian Bale had stayed on as Batman from Christopher Nolan's universe, merging with the newly formed DCEU with Henry Cavill's Clark, Cal, Superman. Man, what that would have been like. Because if you think about it, Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman were a veteran version of the character and someone who had worldly experience. It would have been interesting to see Bale shift right into that, just like Robert Downey Jr. shifted right into the Avengers and the foretelling of all of those characters and whatnot, having been the backbone of that universe. I think that's one place where DCEU kind of failed, but not to take anything away from the Batman that Ben Affleck portrayed, because Ben Affleck's Batman is probably the best celluloid Batman ever brought around. And if it were Christian Bale, just imagine the acting job that Snyder could have gotten out of Christian Bale. Oh my goodness. That could have been amazing. Let's listen further.
And maybe if Chris had really thought that was a potential thing, he might have looked at it differently, but I don't know that. We never really talked about it.
So once you decide, okay, it's the Batman-Superman conflict at the heart, and you were going to start building towards a Justice League, was it always intent from the beginning, like Wonder Woman's going to be in there, we're going to tease Cyborg, we're going to tease Aquaman, like, because I guess the broader context is also Marvel, meanwhile, has Avengers, they're succeeding with their team movie. I don't know if there's pressure at that point to accelerate to a team movie or not. Were you feeling that, or did you... In retrospect, are you happy with the pace you were moving at, or would you have slow played it a little more?
It's a good question. I mean, my knee jerk is that I didn't feel the pressure, but I can't 100% say that's true just because the studio was very excited about, Dawn of Justice was important, in the title, where for me it was like, I didn't really need it, but that was a conversation that we had to kind of tease this Justice League idea. And yeah, I think there might have been, although I will say my thing was the trilogy, or the Trinity, the trilogy. The Trinity is really iconic, and I think that DC, the one thing DC has that say Marvel doesn't have or whatever, any other comic book, it has Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, right?
Yeah.
It's literally, it has the three logos, right? Like, those logos don't need names. Like, you don't have to tell people who they are. You can show those three logos and it's like McDonald's, Target, and frickin' Coca-Cola. Like, it's like literally, the three, they're just massive, the IP, beyond IP. They're like,
if you look at that Comic-Con footage, that announcement, the crowd goes insane just based not only on the dialogue, but just those two emblems on top of each other. And you don't have to say another word. It's just...
No, you don't have to say another word. Yeah.
And he is absolutely correct in saying that, because when you talk about Batman and Superman never having been brought together on film before, and the way that Zack is such an artist with visuals and everything, by the time they were coming around to do this film and bring those two characters together, it was a legendary moment in cinematic history. I remember the scene where they first encounter one another. And Batman is in that famous dock scene chasing the bad guys. And when his Batmobile swerves out of control on the docks, and Superman is standing there around a corner, and the Batmobile, as Batman sees him, he hits the gas on the car, and the car hits Superman and bounces off of him and crashes. And Superman walks over with his cape flapping in a slow motion wind, gets on top of the car and pulls the doors off of the hood of the car, and Batman stands up to look him eye to eye. That that moment on film, when you saw it in the theater, it was like, oh, it's about to go down, and it was amazing. It was truly amazing. Zack is such a creative artist with his visuals. Words weren't needed. You know what I mean? But I always wondered, because we didn't see it in the film, but in the nightmare sequence, we see Cal pull Batman's cowl off his face. But it was never acknowledged that he could see through his cowl and see who his face was. So he knew he was Bruce Wayne. You know what I mean? But he met Bruce Wayne as Clark Kent at that party that Lex Luthor threw and had them both come, but it was never discussed. And I wonder, was there going to be a moment where Zack would have revisited that moment to say, hey, I know who you are? And of course, Batman would learn who Kal is, because if you remember the story from The Dark Knight Returns, you know, in the graphics, Superman had an encounter with Bruce Batman, and when he left and went home to his apartment, and he had gotten dressed to get like in his PJs or whatever to bed down for the evening, Clark, Batman, who had put a tracer on Superman's costume, was like peering through a periscope, you know, through the window of Clark's apartment, and he could see he was Superman. What a great moment in the comics. And I was like, why couldn't they do something like that on film? You know, it's like that would have been really, really excellent to do. But this was some great stuff by these gentlemen. And I think there's still going to be an opportunity to further tell these stories. I believe that if Zack Snyder is called upon, he'll do what's necessary to bring about, you know, what we would like to see cinematically with these characters. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in this interview and hear what he said when he's decided on the villains. Well, let's go to he talking about, first of all, I want to make sure I get into this area with respect and I don't crush over other things. Deciding the villains on this universe.
His vessel?
His child, yeah, his creation, yeah. Sort of using all the stuff that we had on hand, you know. We knew that in Kryptonian mythology there was Doomsday had cracked the moon there, and it kind of like he was around, so it didn't feel like a crazy leap, and he really, and you know, famously had already killed Superman in the comics,
Right.
And so he felt like the right guy. He to me it was like a credible threat, you know.
Right.
I feel like the problem with Superman, it's not a problem, it's amazing, is that you have to give him credible threats. And the two credible threats are Darkseid and Doomsday.
Right.
Everyone else is like a problem that he has to work out. But do you believe that there's real jeopardy at the end of the day? At the end of the day, Superman will defeat Lex Luthor. There's no two ways about it. I mean, it's fine. It's cool. It creates drama. But there's no way you're going to kill Superman. That's impossible. And I was like, no, we're going to kill Superman at the end of this movie. Like, that's how serious of a threat it is. Now, we also knew that because it was a birth and resurrection story, obviously, we're not lowering him off the cross by accident. You know, this is not like it's not like the Jesus metaphors are not like, oh, that they really went vaguely with that. That was like really, I don't know. Yeah, you know, it's a real reach, you know, to kind of say that's what's happening. I just felt like that was an important, mythological touchstone, that if you were avoiding that, you were sort of avoiding the why a little bit of Superman. You were kind of like, you were kowtowing to some sort of like, I don't know what, public pressure or like non-commercialization. I don't know what, but you're pussy now, really, let's be honest.
Yeah. Instead, like you leaned in. You said, oh, we're going to go. Yeah.
But by the way, it's the why I thought it was cool, like why I thought it was interesting. Because like it's that exact iconology that makes it more than a comic book, that makes it mythological. That if you deny the sort of origins and the what Superman is and what he represents to culture, then it might as well be a popcorn bubblegum bullshit thing. You really have to. It to me, it's like got real teeth, and that's what I was always after. And I think that was the whole deconstruction problem. I think in retrospect, I think people, they don't like their heroes deconstructed necessarily. They go to the movies to have their heroes.
Right. They want reassurance. They want something comfortable.
Reassurance that they're there. Now, I would say that in the end, I am a hero's friend. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to. I want to make sure that your devotion to those heroes has a bedrock of testing that allows you to trust them in the end, and that they are not manufactured by a focus group or some fake bullshit, or like the toy makers, or a lot of whatever, all the things. Like, it's literally a focus group, whatever it is. Like I personally think that these movies are really personal to me, right? Like, Zack Snyder's Justice League, I put my fucking name on that movie, right? Like, I literally put my name above the title. It's insanity, right? Like,
and he's right. Marketing and everything, trying to sell toys and gadgets and tie-ins with a film. He wants you to be invested in those characters. He wants you to be invested in the storytelling, and he wants you to be invested in the fact that there are consequences and circumstances where things may not always just work out sunny, and that's a great way, because you can always tantalize your audience with something like that. Zach has the right idea about this thing, and we're gonna go and listen to him speak a little bit more on how he saw bringing Batman into the fold, and then we'll skip to him talking about whether or not the Snyderverse can continue.
Pretty early early on in your mind. It took a little convincing of Ben. He wanted to kind of like know what he was doing and how this Batman was going to be different. You've told me that Matthias Schoenaerts was kind of your backup in a way. Like if that didn't happen, is that true?
Yep. Yep.
Did you? So what was the final? How did you get Ben on board in the end? What did you say to him that got him to say yes?
You know, I think it had a lot to do with I did a drawing where I took Ben's face and I put a cowl on it, you know, whatever. I know it sounds dumb, but I literally took a Sharpie and just like drew the cowl on top of some photocopy of Ben's face. And I guess I convinced myself in that moment that was the way, because obviously he's Bruce Wayne, right?
Right.
He's the most obvious Bruce Wayne, I think, of all the Batmans. If anybody who's played Batman, Ben is the best Bruce Wayne. I mean, of course I'm going to say that, but I'm always going to say that. But like, he's also all the things I like in a Batman, which are, he's legitimately a big dude, right? He's whatever, 6'5" with his boots on. I don't even know what he is. And so he's got that physicality, you know, that I've always longed for in my cinematic Batman, you know? I've always wanted him to be a brawler. And I needed that. Like even what I did with the body and with the suit and everything, I wanted him thick and like, you know, I just wanted him to be able to really hurt you. And I think that when I'd drawn that on the cowl on him, I was like, yeah, that's kind of Batman. Like, I guess I'm kind of stuck now. And so it did take convincing, but I think once I was locked in on it and I had those few lunches and conversations with Ben, I feel like he understood that I cared deeply about what iconographically I wanted Batman to be. And I think he saw that and was like, all right, fuck it, let's do it. Like,
so he visualized Ben Affleck as Batman and was totally sold on that and had to convince Ben to be, you know, a believer in his vision. And they made beautiful music together. That turned out to be one of the best castings, because I remember hearing about Ben being cast as Batman, and I was saying to myself, I don't know about that. But to Snyder's credit, he is Bruce Wayne. The way Bruce Wayne is drawn in the animations and everything, that's Ben Affleck. It's like you could look at him and see that, you know what I mean? So it was a wonderful, again, casting. Now, we're going to skip to this next part where it'll just where he speaks on whether or not the Snyderverse can continue.
Hey, to the diehard Snyderverse fans that will never give up hope on seeing you return, to seeing the conclusion, the stuff that you had outlined for Justice League 2 and 3. If you're speaking to them directly, should they keep the hope alive? Is it worth it at this point? I mean, what do you say?
All I'll say about that is that, you know, first of all, the fact, again, that we're talking about, even just that, is testament to, and I think confirms in some way the validity of the mythology that we were working on. Like the kind of obviously those heroes touch a nerve. Obviously those heroes are meant to, in the end, uplift and confirm sort of the human existence or the why of, you know, this crazy ride we're all on. You know, they tend to be a metaphor, you know, like for all of us, I think. And so, you know, not to be too self-important, but like I think that, and by the way, I'm just a shepherd of those characters. Obviously, they've already been taken and are going, you know, other people will take them and other people will take them after that. And that's how it should be. But I would never say that there's no way. I would never, because I was on the ride that created Justice League. And if you were in my shoes, there were numerous times, dark times, when I would say there is no chance that there will ever be my version of Justice League will never exist. And it can't. Cost, politics, everything stood against it. And yet, it exists. And, you know, I think the fans should never forget that they did that, you know. And they also did a lot of, you know, we raised a ton of money for suicide prevention, and they really did a lot of good. And I think that they catch a lot of flack for being toxic or whatever, but they literally saved human lives. So you can go fuck yourself if that's what you think.
Wow. And with that, it's like, I'll bring this to an end because Zack, in that last line of what he spoke, was so passionate because of his personal loss and how his project was incomplete, and he was allowed to complete it because the fan base has stood in lieu in support of him. And like he said, even for suicide awareness, there were things that the fans were able to assist with that he never saw or thought to be possible. So, as he states, there will be always an open door for things to change. And if the Snyderverse is to continue, it'll be the fans that'll assist in that happening. As he said, there was a time when he thought that his version of the film would never see the light of day, and it has. And that's all you can ask for, hope, which is what Superman represents, right? Isn't that amazing? So, listen, I want to thank you all for, you know, tuning in and supporting me here with the Nerds on Culture and Stormy B-Man Reacts, because this is what we do. We try to make the most out of the experience of our, let's just call it our nerd culture, huh? And so, until we meet again, I want to say this is Stormy B-Man. Shout out to the mighty LDBC. And I hope that you all enjoy this video. Please like, subscribe, and share. And let someone else know about, you know, what's happening with, you know, the nerds. It's like we do this show for all of us, you know what I'm saying? So we look to get on in, get it in and get it out. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and we'll meet again. So, peace to everyone.